the end of the day, when it's all said and done, I'm reminded that we are all mortal. And today, we've all been reminded with the passing of probably one of the greatest men to ever walk during our lifetime. And I'm not saying that facetiously or in any way to be taken lightly. Today, we mourn the death of Stan Lee. The AVClub.com calls him a comics industry legend and co-creator of such timeless characters as Spider-Man, Iron Man, Black Panther, Thor, the X-Men, and the Fantastic Four. He was 95 today when he passed. It's kind of hard, just processing it, knowing that he was old, that you would see him in cameos and just see him aging over the past 10 years of Marvel comic movies that have come out. I believe he was even in the Spider-Man movies. I'm pretty sure he was in the noughts, the 2000s. And I don't know, I think the reason why I'm taking it so hard is because I kind of grew up on Stan Lee comics. Saturday mornings weren't nowhere near exciting if I wasn't watching Spider-Man and X-Men on Fox Kids. That was the primary reason why I lived, to be completely honest with you. He gave many children, many kids growing up, a reason to want to wake up on Saturday mornings and see what would happen next on those cartoon series. I mean, X-Men was amazing. Spider-Man was amazing. The storytelling was amazing. The characters that he created were just brilliant. Three-dimensional. Amazing, amazing, amazing. And then when the movies came out, well, those also were amazing. I remember when I saw the first Spider-Man movie. I believe it was it 2004 when that movie came out, or maybe that was the sequel. But again, just being able to see Spider-Man in an actual, big time silver screen. It was my first year in college. Being able to see that, it was awesome. And I can't thank you, Stan Lee, enough for creating, the characters that you created. He was born Stanley Lieber in New York City way back in 1992. That's like just after the end of World War I. And as a teenager during the Depression, he worked odd jobs to help his cash-strapped parents. One of those jobs was a gopher at Timely Publications, where Lee met Joe Simon and Jack Kirby, the creators of Captain America. Lee learned everything he could from the duo, and when Simon and Kirby were let go from the company, Lee took over their jobs editing Timely Comics, and he was only 18 years old. Lee took a break from Timely to enlist during World War II, serving in the Signal Corps, before eventually becoming a writer for the Training Films Division, making him only one of 9 servicemen with the classification playwright. Upon returning from the war, he married Joan Clayton Bucock, who he remained with for over 70 years. The two had a daughter, Joan Celia, in 1950. In 1953, a second daughter, Jan, died only 3 days later. Lee continued to run Timely Comics department through the 1950s, simply producing whatever stories he was assigned. Westerns, horror, crime. At the time, there were a number of genres competing with superheroes on more or less equal footing, and Lee wrote for them all. But in 1961, Lee's wife suggested that rather than writing simply to please his boss, he tried telling stories his own way. Taking inspiration from Detective Comics hit Justice League, Lee came up with his own superhero team, the Fantastic Four. The title was successful enough that Lee launched one hit superhero title after another in its wake, and gave the company a new name, Marvel. and co-creating a roster of titles that also included Spider-Man, The Incredible Hulk, Iron Man, Daredevil, and X-Men. Lee did more than launch a comic book company that became a 21st century media juggernaut, and more than populate generations of American kids' imaginations. Lee, with collaborators like Kirby, who he hired back, and Steve Ditko, changed the way comic book stories were told. The previous generation of superheroes represented by Detective Comics, mainstays like Superman, Wonder Woman, Batman, were larger-than-life archetypes. Lee made his heroes down to earth. Spider-Man could sling webs and soar through the city, fighting evildoers, but he still had to deal with money woes and relationship problems, just like any other teenager, just like me. At the time, of course. Lee's heroes often a contentious relationship with the public and even with their own powers. While the Flash never questioned the benefits of running fast, characters like the Hulk, Cyclops, and Thing saw their powers as a burden, as often as they did a blessing. The public responded to this more nuanced storytelling, as nearly all of Lee's titles were instant successes. Through the 60s, Lee managed to write and art direct nearly every Marvel comic while maintaining relationships with fans and tirelessly promoting the imprint. Lee's enthusiasm for his comics was infectious, and every alliterative, adjective-filled missive to the readers overflowed with Lee's boundless energy, all signed off with his trademark Excelsior. Lee, Kirby, and Ditko also maintained airtight continuity across all of Marvel's titles, something that had never been attempted before. Not only did Lee's characters build up a history, storylines could carry over from Fantastic Four to The Incredible Hulk and Spider-Man, could show up in any issue of X-Men without interfering with the ongoing story in his own book. In 1966, Ditko left the company and Lee began a fruitful collaboration with his replacement, John Romita Sr. The two began tackling social issues, thrusting their characters into the political turmoil of the late 1960s. Lee and Kirby also introduced comics' first black superheroes, Black Panther, who first appeared in Fantastic Four, and the Falcon, an ally of Captain America. In both his comics and his letters to the reader, Lee spoke out in favor of the civil rights movement, consciously modeling X-Men's Professor X and Magneto on Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. He said, "Magneto, I did not think of him as a bad guy. He was trying to defend mutants, and because society was not treating them fairly, he decided to teach society a lesson. I never thought of him as a villain." In 1972, Lee stepped back from his prolific writing duties to serve as publisher of Marvel. In that role, he continued shepherding ideas and tirelessly promoting the company, and comic books in general, and narrating Spider-Man and Hulk animated series in the early 1980s. But in 1996, with comic sales in a slump and the company's finances overextended with investments in other entertainment properties, Marvel went bankrupt and Lee was pushed out. Eventually, he was invited to return as chairman emeritus, a strictly honorary title that allows him to write the occasional comic and serve as the company's public face, a role Lee relished for the rest of his life. In the meantime, Marvel grew into the juggernaut it is today. With the characters Lee created anchoring a string of top-grossing films, Lee himself has made cameos in 24 of them, and TV series following Disney's acquisition of Marvel Entertainment in 2009. The last year of Lee's life was sadly marred by legal battles. He sued POW Entertainment, the company he co-founded in 2001, for allegedly tricking him into signing over his rights to his name in a bizarre case of what appeared to be bad actors all jockeying for control of Lee's estate. That lawsuit against POW was dropped in July, just after Lee filed for a restraining order against a former business manager who had been accused of taking advantage of his impaired hearing, vision, and judgment. After dropping the POW suit, Lee released a statement indicating that he was thrilled to be back with the people who truly had his best interests in mind, rather than simply wanting his money. Tributes to Lee have begun pouring in on social media, many of them from people whose careers she helped advance either at Marvel Comics or its film counterpart at Marvel Studios. People such as Kevin Feige, Ryan Reynolds, Chris Evans, Gail Simone, many folks, Hugh Jackman, just kind of going through the list. But obviously, he's had a huge impact on us all around the world. I remember when I was in Singapore, and it was, I believe, the debut of one of the Avengers movies, Civil War, and they just had the biggest posters up and the biggest full-life statues of Iron Man and Captain America. I cannot understate the impact that Stan Lee has had on all of our lives. And while he's gone, he will never be forgotten. I mean, we talk about Greek gods and heroes and people like Homer and the great philosophers that lived 2,000 plus years ago. People who created the heroes that we read about in our high school books, if not middle school, about Achilles and Hercules. And Stan Lee and the folks at Marvel pretty much created a mythology that for us will never be forgotten in our times, where if we all take care of ourselves 2,000 plus years later, if not more, we'll be talking about these folks. We'll be talking about the Professor X's and the Magnetos, the Black Panthers, the Jean Greys, the Scarlet Witches, you name it. So thank you from the bottom of my heart to such a creative genius, Stan Lee. You will truly be missed. We thank you. I thank you so much for your contributions to this world, to our society, to art and entertainment. Something that I think we all take for granted far too many times. I know I do. But I thank you, Stan Lee, for all that you've done for us. What a great man. Thank you for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow. Peace out.